Welcome to stellar sci-fi. In the shimmering center of the Cornix Nebula, where stars fizzled like soda bubbles and comets played hopscotch across the void, there floated the imperial heart of the Galactic's empire, planet Blorxia 7. It was a world of flamboyant opulence, with buildings shaped like musical instruments and trees that sang backup harmonies when the wind blew. Towering above it all like a glittery disco ball gone mad was the Imperial Citadel, the home of Empress Zorlana Kvibbleshank III. She was a creature of impossible beauty and confusing anatomy, with 11 eyes, 8 legs, and hips so wide they had their own moonlet. Her mood shifted faster than the tides of Neptune, and currently, she was suffering from a severe case of royal boredom. Zorlana had tried everything. Galactic opera performed underwater, anti-gravity flamethrower ballet, even a petting zoo filled with sentient clouds. Nothing sparked joy. Her advisors quivered every time she sighed, for history had proven that a bored empress often led to spontaneous planetary relocations or surprise invasions of nearby systems. So when her spiritual entertainment consultant, a sentient orb named Fizzletoot, suggested importing entertainment from a primitive blue planet known as Earth, she approved it with a lazy wave of her jewel-encrusted tentacle. That is how Gregory Splint, known back home simply as Greg, found himself abducted in the middle of a lunch rush at the Spicy Spoon, a small Earth diner where he worked as a waiter. Greg had always taken pride in his ability to carry 6 plates of hot wings while performing the electric slide, a talent no one had ever requested but which he showcased regularly. He had just finished a particularly spicy shimmy when the air sparkled and a wormhole yanked him into a very different lunch shift. He landed with a thud on an absurdly polished floor that smelled like fresh ozone and lavender vapor. Around him stood guards with helmets shaped like pineapples and weapons that looked suspiciously like saxophones. Before he could scream, a voice boomed from a balcony high above. The court announcer, wearing robes made entirely of reflective fish scales, cleared his throat and declared, presenting Gregory Splint of Earth. Professional food courier. Practitioner of floor-based gyrations. Suspected wizard of cheese sticks. Greg looked up dazed and locked eyes with the Empress herself. Zorlana stared down at him, tapping one of her 17 fingers on the armrest of her throne. She was not impressed. "Is this the one with the pelvic vortex ritual I heard about?" she asked flatly. Her advisors nodded gravely. Greg blinked twice, cleared his throat, and said, "I also do birthday specials." That caused a few nervous titters in the crowd. Someone fainted in the back. Before Zorlana could order Greg to perform or be dissolved in a vat of giggle acid, a quiet humming sound filled the court. Princess Frabnella entered, floating in her gleaming hover chair. Frabnella, the Empress's daughter, had a rare condition called Flabian rigidosis, which limited her ability to perform the gravity-defying dances of her people. She was intelligent, sarcastic, and often underestimated by the court. As she entered, all conversation ceased. Even the fountain stopped burbling. Greg, seeing the young princess in her chair, felt an instinctive awkwardness melt into something else. Respect. Curiosity. Maybe even inspiration. He stepped forward and bowed with the dignity of someone who had once spilled spaghetti on a governor but owned it. "May I have this dance, your floatiness?" he asked. The court gasped in 10 different dialects. Frabnella blinked. Then she smiled, wide and genuine. "I thought you'd never ask." What followed could only be described as chaos, joy, and bad rhythm combined into an art form. Greg danced. He shimmied, spun, did a questionable version of the worm, and at one point attempted something that might have been breakdancing but also resembled a seizure. Frabnella joined in, using her hover chair like a hoverboard, swerving and twirling with newfound abandon. They moved together like a blender full of noodles and lightning. The Empress stared, slack-jawed. Around her, nobles were crying, applauding, or fainting again. One royal guard attempted to imitate Greg and somehow ended up inside a chandelier. The Empress rose slowly, a dramatic gesture that triggered the palace's theme music and a glitter cannon. She descended from her throne and walked toward the dancing duo, her tentacles swaying to a beat she did not yet understand. "Human," she said, and her voice echoed through the chamber. "You have accomplished something unthinkable. You made my daughter dance. You made her laugh. You made this court feel alive again. And you did it while wearing sneakers with tiny wings on them. Greg blinked and offered a shrug. It's just vibes, he said. The Empress narrowed all 11 of her eyes. For this, she continued, you shall not be thrown into the confusion pit. Greg let out an audible sigh of relief. You shall instead be appointed royal ambassador of rhythmic diplomacy. You will teach the Empire the ancient Earth tradition of the shimmy. And so began Greg's strange and unexpected second life. Each day he held dance classes in the royal ballroom. Nobles once too proud to blink were now popping and locking with enthusiasm. Courtiers waltzed with alien jellyfish. Even the Empress herself joined in, her massive hips now wielded as weapons of cultural exchange. Princess Frebnella became his co-instructor and occasional prank partner, often introducing new moves named after obscure Earth snacks. Their signature routine, the flaming Cheeto shuffle, became a galactic sensation. But not everyone was pleased. On the distant and bitter moon of Splarn, a former court choreographer named Weibler Greach watched the new wave of dance with boiling resentment. Once the most celebrated movement designer in the galaxy, Weibler had been replaced, forgotten, and now he plotted revenge. He would reclaim the court. He would prove that true dance required structure, discipline, and at least 6 minor injuries per performance. And as the stars spun and the Empress twirled, the music played on. Greg remained blissfully unaware that his greatest challenge was yet to come, not in the form of tempo or tempo-related injuries, but in the shape of an angry ex-choreographer wielding a grudge, a portable stage, and a weaponized jazz square. Greg, meanwhile, was elbow-deep in an enthusiastic tutorial on the ancient Earth art of the sprinkler. Royal guards clumsily rotated their elbows while mimicking lawn equipment, sweating nervously as Greg paced between them with the exaggerated seriousness of a Broadway director. Princess Frebnella hovered nearby with a whistle, blowing it whenever someone failed to commit emotionally to the motion. You've got to become the sprinkler, she barked at a duke who looked like he'd rather be boiled in plasma than rotate one more limb. The grand ballroom had been transformed. What once served as the venue for dull galactic summits and awkward royal brunches was now adorned with neon lights, bass-pumping speakers, and holographic disco orbs spinning gently above heads. The royal court, to the horror of traditionalists, was thriving under the influence of rhythm. Delegates from across the star systems had begun to arrive weekly just to attend Greg's movement seminars. Trade deals were now finalized through interpretive dance-offs. A minor planetary conflict had been averted the previous week with an emergency limbo contest. Still, not all was well in the vast and sequined corridors of Blorxia 7. Deep in the shadowy underbelly of the palace, where the cleaning droids whispered gossip and ancient mold grew into philosophical shapes, Weibler Greach plotted his return. Weibler, once known as the Footwork Phantom, had been cast out when his patented dance style, aggressive spasmodic elegance, accidentally collapsed the imperial wine cellar during a diplomatic waltz. He had vowed never to choreograph again unless it was to bring down the man who replaced him. In a dim, slightly damp rehearsal chamber, Weibler trained alone, each movement a carefully controlled explosion of bitterness. His pupils, literally, he had detachable ones, spun with intensity as he rehearsed the forbidden dance forms once banned by the Empire's Cultural Safety Bureau. He had acquired a secret weapon too, a sentient rhythm parasite known as Beatser, who pulsed with hypnotic timing and whispered sinister tempo variations directly into Weibler's earlobes. Back in the palace, Greg was unaware of this brewing storm. He was busy trying to teach the Empress a cha-cha variation that involved a lot of eyebrow movement, which was complicated, considering her face had 3 times the standard number of brows. She frowned so hard during practice that 2 advisors passed out from sheer intimidation. Greg, undeterred, launched into a dramatic speech about the power of funk, one hand on his heart, the other pointing at an alien noble attempting to moonwalk in 6 directions at once. Frebnella, watching from the sidelines, was already planning their next showcase. She wanted to premiere a new piece titled Galactic Noodle, inspired by Greg's breakfast routine and a dream she had involving a tap-dancing burrito. The Empress approved the concept instantly, saying only, if it doesn't involve confetti, it is an art. At the same time, Weibler made his first move. Disguised as a traveling posture consultant named Mr. Fonkel, He infiltrated the palace under the guise of correcting the Empress's quartz neck alignment, which had allegedly been compromised by excessive head bobs. He shuffled into the palace wearing a holographic bow tie and carrying a suitcase filled with sinister glitter and cursed jazz shoes. No one suspected him. After all, who would question a man who bowed at 30-degree angles and claimed to have studied flexibility under a black hole? Greg, however, felt something strange in the air. During his afternoon lesson on the Earth tradition of line dancing, he noticed one of the guards snapping on the offbeat, a heresy in his newly established galactic groove code. "That's weird," Greg muttered as the rhythm of the room slipped slightly sideways. Frabnella noticed too. The hoverchair began to vibrate strangely, responding to some unfamiliar frequency. "Something's off," she said, narrowing her eyes. Greg nodded. "It's like someone is outdancing us from inside." And thus, the palace unknowingly crept toward its first-ever full-blown rhythm duel. Tensions hummed under the tiles. Suspicion lingered in the shuffle steps. And from somewhere deep in the dance floor's pulse, a challenge was forming. The beat was changing. The Empire didn't know it yet, but it was about to find out whether a man from New Jersey, armed with nothing but instinct, footwork, and a deeply questionable understanding of salsa, could defend the future of interstellar diplomacy. But for now, the music continued. And Greg danced. The music continued, but something beneath the surface had shifted. The rhythm was still there, catchy, infectious, impossible to ignore, but it was no longer just about dance. It was about control. Greg felt it in the bones he barely used anymore thanks to the palace's zero-gravity massage pods. Something, or someone, was throwing off the groove, and not in the usual fun way involving interpretive sneezing. Greg stood at the edge of the grand ballroom, arms crossed, watching the dance floor with squinted suspicion. A conga line of Blorxian senators weaved past, hurling legislation into the air while somewhere near the buffet, a cluster of dignitaries from planet Snarn performed synchronized jazz hands as part of a diplomatic proposal. Everything looked normal, but the timing, the sacred, universal timing, was off by half a beat. Just enough to make Greg's right eye twitch. He turned to Frabnella, who was currently teaching a group of noble toddlers the ancient human art of breakdancing via hoverchair donuts. "You feel it too, right?" Greg asked. She spun in a perfect 720-degree arc before answering. "The rhythm's dirty. Like someone dunked it in lukewarm soup and made it lie about its taxes." Greg nodded grimly. He didn't know much about politics, space law, or how to operate half the buttons on his palace-issued wrist communicator, but he did know when a beat was being sabotaged. And someone was trying to hijack the groove. That someone, at that very moment, was crouched inside a hidden sublevel of the palace, surrounded by 12 metronomes and a suspiciously sassy tap-dancing cactus. Weibler Greach, still disguised as Mr. Fonkel, cackled as he adjusted Beatsur's rhythm output, causing a mild seizure in a nearby chandelier. "They've grown soft," he sneered. "Weak. Obsessed with joy and wiggles." It's time they remembered the cold discipline of the box-step reign. Beatsur hummed in agreement, vibrating in a sinister 7/4 time signature. Weibler pressed a button on his control panel, and at that exact moment, a ballroom dancer 2 floors above attempted a high-energy disco leap and accidentally launched herself through a stained-glass window shaped like the Empress's eyebrow. The crowd clapped politely, assuming it was a new trend. Meanwhile, Greg and Frabnella gathered a trusted circle of rhythm-sensitive allies. There was Korn, the double-jointed bassoonist who could hear offbeat tempo shifts from 2 star systems away. There was Madame Clonk, a former Blorxian stunt choreographer who now taught aggressive yoga. And of course, Blibble, the sentient gelatin who communicated exclusively through interpretive vibrations and occasional slaps. They convened in the Royal Juice Bar, which had recently been turned into an improvisational salsa lounge. Greg laid out his theory while sipping a smoothie that tasted like cinnamon and mild paranoia. Someone's infecting the beat. Not just influencing it, contaminating it. It's like they're rewriting the rhythm DNA of the Empire. Frabnella slammed her fist on the bar, launching a bowl of glitter fruit into orbit. "Then we fight it. We counter-rhythm it into oblivion." The plan was simple. Tomorrow was the Empire's most sacred holiday, the Festival of 9 Grooves. Traditionally, Each groove was represented by a style of dance. Funk for the groove of unity. Waltz for the groove of patience. Interpretive flailing for the groove of existential panic. It would be the perfect place for Greg to test the pulse of the people, and for Weibler to launch his sinister debut. The music began with a slow, deliberate thump, a heartbeat that echoed through the bones of everyone present in the grand ballroom of Blorxia 7. It was the start of the first groove, the groove of unity, and Greg felt the rhythm slide into his spine like an old friend offering a high five and a questionable life choice. He stepped forward, flanked by Frabnella, Madame Clonk, Corn the bassoonist, and Blibble the sentient gelatin, who was already pulsing to the beat like a disco jelly of vengeance. The crowd leaned in. Delegates and dignitaries from across the galaxy had gathered for this moment, and none of them had any idea that they were about to witness the most important dance-off in interstellar history. Weibler Greach chose that exact moment to make his entrance. Smoke billowed. Lasers fired. A kazoo orchestra screamed into existence. And then he emerged. Dressed in his sequin jumpsuit of despair, Weibler did not walk. He moonglided. The crowd gasped. Someone dropped a fondue scepter. The Empress's eyebrows twitched. Weibler snapped his fingers. The room went cold. The music shifted to a discordant, robotic thrum. The pulse turned mathematical, mechanical. He launched into his forbidden pirouette of judgment, spinning faster than reason, faster than dignity. Court members began to wobble, hypnotized. A diplomat from Glarf started filing paperwork with his kneecaps. The rhythm was being overwritten. The groove was in danger. Greg took a breath. And then he danced. He didn't counter the spin. He absorbed it. He began with the sprinkler, eased into the shopping cart, threw in the regretful noodle and even, at one point, flossed with such intensity that 3 galaxies aligned. He didn't fight the cold rhythm. He remixed it. Frabnella joined in with her hoverchair doing wheelies mid-beat, throwing sauce and sass like a DJ made of rebellion. Madame Clonk did a cartwheel, so aggressive it rewrote the gravitational laws of a nearby moon. Corn blasted a bassoon solo that made 2 spectators fall in love on the spot. Even Blibble bounced in perfect sync, spelling hope in gelatinous Morse code. The room shifted. The cold, robotic rhythm began to bend, first reluctantly, then completely, until it snapped back into joy. Weibler faltered mid-spin. He tripped. Landed with a tragic split that echoed like a sad trombone. Beatzer shrieked in defeat and popped like an over-mic'd bubble. The spell was broken. The crowd erupted. The Empress stood, her entire body pulsing with pride. She descended from her throne and approached Greg, Frabnella, and their mismatched squad of groove defenders. "Gregory Splint," she said, removing her glitter-crusted tiara and placing it on Greg's head backwards because she had no idea how Earth heads worked. "You have done more than teach us to dance. You have reminded us that rhythm is not control. It is connection. Joy. A universal chaos that brings meaning to our many legs." Greg, suddenly emotional and slightly dizzy from the flossing, nodded. He reached out to shake her hand, but accidentally pulled her into a spontaneous conga line instead. No one minded. Weibler, still on the floor in a dramatic and uncomfortably prolonged split, was escorted out by 2 polite guards and a therapy possum. He would later open a small interpretive rage dance studio on a distant moon called Plarn and finally learn the value of subtlety. As for Greg, he was promoted to Grandmaster of Galactic Choreography, a title that came with unlimited pancakes, a personal hover scooter, and the ability to declare any Tuesday a holiday. Frabnella became Minister of Funk and Accessibility, inventing dozens of new hoverchair moves that swept the galaxy like joyful wildfire. Blorxia 7 thrived. The groove, once lost, now pulsed through every street, every embassy, every kitchen. And from that day forward, any alien who tried to declare rhythm tyranny would find themselves immediately challenged to a duel. With Greg Splint, the waiter who danced so hard, he saved the universe.